The egg burst against his temple with a sick, wet crack that strangled every sound in the saloon. Yellow yolk slid down Sheriff Vance Holloway's lined face, tracing the old white scar that carved through his left eyebrow and dripping into the bristles of his salt-and-iron mustache. He didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand. He simply stood in the doorway of the Rattlesnake Saloon, dust from 3 days in the saddle dulling the black of his coat, his badge catching the lamplight the way a painted target catches the sun. The man who'd thrown the egg, Cutter Briggs, gap-toothed and proud of it, let loose a laugh that brayed like a drunk donkey. The sound rippled through the room, dragging chuckles out of the other 5 men scattered around the place. They lounged at the bar against the walls near the back door like they owned every nail in it. For 2 months they more or less had. They turned Redemption Springs into their personal hunting ground, robberies when they were bored, beatings when they were drunk, killings when the mood soured. The last sheriff had run. The mayor before that had died on the floor choking on his own blood. The message was clear enough: this town belonged to them. "Welcome to redemption, lawman," Cutter drawled, one hand resting with casual insult on the butt of his revolver. "We got customs around here. New sheriffs eat eggs, fresh ones." Behind the bar, the woman holding the basket rose, stood still as a grave marker. Her face was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix, and dark bruises wrapped her wrists like shackles. The wicker trembled in her hands. 3 townsfolk huddled in the far corner: an old man with a cane, a woman clinging to a battered Bible, a boy on the edge of manhood, eyes down, pretending not to look while staring at everything. Vance Holloway brushed the slime from his cheek with slow, careful fingers. His hands were long, the kind made for piano keys or books, but the skin across his knuckles was thick, hardened from decades spent closing around steel. His eyes, pale gray, almost colorless, moved from one outlaw to the next, not in a hurry, not scared, just counting, weighing, filing faces away. Over 49 years he'd worn a lot of names. Some whispered, some spat: the Phantom of Abilene, the Quiet Gun, Death in a Black Coat. Cutter Briggs didn't know any of those. Not yet. Before we ride any farther into this trail, do me a favor. If this kind of frontier tale speaks to you, tap that like button. And if you haven't settled in with us yet, hit subscribe and join the campfire. Let me know in the comments what country you're listening from. It still amazes me how these old western winds reach so many corners of the world. Stay in the saddle till the end. What's coming, you won't see it coming. Redemption Springs had been dying long before Vance stepped off his horse that morning. You could smell it in the air. Death on the frontier had its own scent, not just rot, not just old sweat and spoiled meat. It was quieter than that: boards nailed over windows, doors locked at noon, swinging signs never moved by a breeze because no one opened the doors beneath them. It was the smell of people who'd already given up. The telegram had reached him in Santa Fe 3 days earlier, desperate ink on cheap paper. "Need sheriff, will pay triple, town under siege, please." He'd turned his back on 20 such pleas that year alone. He was done with badges, done with orders, done standing over good men and women who died because he hadn't been quite fast enough. The gunfight stayed with you, so did the faces. But something in those 2 words, Redemption Springs, had hooked itself in him. Maybe it was the name. Maybe the raw panic pressed into each letter. Maybe he was just too tired to keep pretending he didn't care. He'd ridden hard, stopping only when his horse threatened to drop. And now here he was, in a lamplit saloon with eggs sliding off his jaw and 6 outlaws grinning at him like wolves with a lamb cornered. For the first time since he'd turned onto this road, he wondered if coming had been a mistake. Cutter Briggs began to circle him, boots scraping lazy arcs on the warped floorboards. 5'9", wiry, mean to the marrow. A man who thought cruelty was the same as courage. His men watched from their posts, 2 at the bar, 1 slouched near the piano, 2 planted by the back door like plugs in a barrel. This was a pattern, Vance realized, a routine. They'd done their little show more than once. "You gonna talk, old-timer?" Cutter taunted. "Or just stand there lookin' like you forgot why you came?" When Vance finally spoke, his voice was low, scraped bare and stone-hard, granite rubbing over granite. "I'm givin' you 1 chance." Cutter snorted. "1 chance for what?" "To ride out." The room broke open with laughter. They howled, slapped the bar, doubled over. They shouldn't have. Cutter Briggs didn't know half of what he should have known. The rest could have filled a cemetery and already had. Vance Holloway had been 17 the first time he took a life. A claim jumper-up in Colorado, the kind of man who thought murder was just another way to move a fence. That man had killed Vance's father and taken his land. The trial afterward lasted all of 3 minutes. The hanging took longer. Vance never forgot the way the man's legs kicked, the soft, ugly sound when the neck snapped, the silence afterwards heavy and final. At 19, he'd turned bounty hunter. At 23, a U.S. Marshal's star rested on his chest. By 30, 47 men were dead by his hand, some in face-to-face duels on sun-blasted streets, most in raids and ambushes where the shooting never stopped long enough to say anyone's name. They followed him in his sleep, all of them. His legend hadn't come from speed, though he was fast, it came from something colder: inevitability. When Vance Holloway set his sights on a man, that man ended up in a grave. Running didn't help, hiding didn't help, prayer didn't help. At 35, he hung up the badge, bought a small spread in New Mexico, raised horses, tried to let the memories fade. But the West doesn't leave its ghosts alone. Young guns kept drifting in, begging for a chance to test themselves against the Phantom of Abilene. He planted 11 of them in his own back pasture before he finally sold the ranch and took to drifting, trying to stay ahead of his own reputation and his own nightmares. Now here he stood at 49, yolk drying in his mustache, 6 killers facing him down. "Leave," Cutter repeated, stepping close enough that Vance could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You deaf old man, this town's ours, we took it. You're just another fool gonna die in it." He jabbed his finger against Vance's chest. "You're not walking out of here." "Someone won't," Vance replied, his gaze never wavered. Behind his stillness, his mind moved like a man laying out a battle map. Cutter in front, overconfident, right-handed, revolver riding loose in the leather. 2 by the bar, likely brothers, same eyes, same jawline, both drunk enough to wobble but not enough to miss at close range. The one near the piano, thin, jittery hand twitching toward his gun every few seconds. The 2 at the back door, sober, alert, doing the real watching. 6 guns, 1 lawman. Bad odds for most. For Vance, it was a column of numbers he meant to solve. Rose set the egg basket down. Her hands trembled so hard the wicker rattled. "Please," she whispered, voice barely sound, "just leave, they'll kill you." "Ma'am," Vance said, eyes never leaving Cutter, "when I'm finished, I'd be obliged if you'd bring me some coffee." "Black." Cutter hooted, "You hear that? Grandpa wants coffee." He turned to his men. "Tell you what, Sheriff, nobody, get down on your knees, lick that mess off the floor nice and humble, and maybe we'll let you crawl out of here." In the corner, the 3 townsfolk shifted, small movements of big fear. The old man tightened his grip on his cane. The woman clutched her Bible till her knuckles went bloodless. The boy stared wide-eyed at Vance, trying to decide if he was watching a hero or another dead fool. Vance spoke to them, not to Cutter. "Folks best step outside, fast." They didn't budge, terror had nailed their boots to the floor. Now Vance said. Something in that single word, something cold and finished, cut through their paralysis. The old man lurched to his feet. The woman seized the boy's arm. They stumbled for the door and slipped out like smoke escaping a burning room. Cutter watched them go and grinned. "Smart, clearin' the witnesses, no one left to say whether you squealed when you got shot." Vance took off his hat, laid it neatly on the nearest table and brushed some trail dust from his coat. Then his hands dropped to his sides. Silence gathered. There is a kind of stillness that drifts in just before men start killing each other. It presses against your ears, settles in your chest, makes your skin itch. In the Rattlesnake Saloon, that silence thickened like storm clouds rolling over the plains. Cutter's smile twitched. Some old instinct, the kind that kept prey animals alive, whispered that something was wrong with this picture. The way Vance stood, loose, easy, weight settled, didn't fit with a scared old man. "Boys," Cutter's voice dipped, uncertainty creeping in. "On 3 we." "No counting," Vance cut in. "You want me dead, do it, or walk away, decide." The 2 men at the back door exchanged a look. They were older than the others, somewhere in their 30s, old enough to recognize that kind of steady calm, old enough to have heard campfire tales. Stories about a man who didn't miss, a man who always walked away. You're the Phantom," one of them blurted, "Vance Holloway." The name slammed through the room like a thrown chair. Color bled out of Cutter's face. The brothers at the bar straightened. The nervous man by the piano took a full step back as if space alone could shield him. "That can't be," Cutter stammered. "Phantom's dead, been dead 10 years. Retired," Vance corrected. "Different thing." One of the backdoor men slowly raised his hands, palms out. "We're done," he said. "This ain't worth it. Stand down." "Get back here," Cutter snapped, voice cracking. "That's an order." "Sorry, Cutter." The two eased sideways toward the exit. "You wanna die, you do it without us." They slipped out into the street. 4 against 1 now, better odds, still not good. Cracks showed in Cutter's confidence, doubt crept into his eyes, a little shadow tugging at the edges. The stories about the Phantom of Abilene were not kind. The man who'd wiped out the Red River gang by himself. The same lawman who'd walked into Black Mesa and dragged 7 wanted men out in irons. A gun who didn't hesitate, didn't blink, and didn't leave work half done. "I don't buy it," Cutter muttered, though his hand shook above his gun. "You're just some worn-out drunk playing pretend." Vance didn't answer. There was nothing left worth saying. The brothers moved first. They drew together like they'd drilled it 100 times, 2 hands darting for 2 guns, leather creaking, twin hammers pulled back in sync, 2 muzzles rising. 2 shots cracked, not theirs. Vance's revolver seemed to appear in his hand between one breath and the next. No twirling, no show, 1 heartbeat, empty hand, next heartbeat, gun smoking. Both brothers fell back from the bar before their brains caught up, each with a hole in the chest big enough to slide a silver dollar through. They were dead before their fingers finished curling. The thin outlaw by the piano panicked and snapped off a wild shot. The bullet tore splinters from the wall 2 feet from Vance's head. Vance's return shot dropped him across the piano keys. A harsh, broken chord rang out and then settled into the silence like a final note. Cutter stood frozen. His revolver was drawn, but his arm never made it higher than his hip. His mind simply couldn't make sense of what his eyes had witnessed, 3 men erased in the space it takes for a clock's second hand to quiver. "Drop it," Vance murmured. Cutter stared at his gun, at Vance, at the quiet figure standing in front of him like death given boots and a badge. He lifted the revolver anyway. Time stretched thin. Cutter's arm moved in slow motion, every muscle trembling as he raised the barrel. He knew he was going to die. Pride wouldn't let him live. Pride fills more graves than bullets ever will. Vance could have killed him the second his fingers jerked. He could have fired while the gun was still crawling up from Cutter's thigh. Instead he waited, offering one last sliver of mercy, one last chance for the man to choose swallowing his pride over taking a bullet. Their eyes met. In Cutter's gaze, Vance saw the same desperate hunger he'd seen 100 times, men who would rather die remembered than live forgotten. "Don't," Vance warned, "last chance." Cutter's finger tightened around the trigger. Vance fired. Cutter staggered. His own gun spat a shot into the ceiling, showering the room with dust and wood. He blinked down at the red blooming across his shirt as if genuinely surprised it could happen to him. He dropped to his knees, mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "Sorry," Vance said and meant it. Cutter pitched forward into the sawdust, the room filled with the dense smell of powder and the weight of 4 sudden corpses, 4 lives cut off faster than most men can whisper a prayer. Rose emerged from behind the bar, eyes wide, lips parted. "Dear gods." Vance ejected the spent shells one by one. Each brass casing hit the floor with a thin metallic clink. He slid fresh rounds into the cylinder with the ease of ritual. Click, 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 click. The rhythm of survival, the ceremony of killing. His hands were steady. They always were. That might have been the worst part. There'd been a time when every life he took carved something out of him. Now the sadness was there but distant, an old ache beneath a layer of scar tissue. Rose set a cup of coffee in front of him with shaking hands. The liquid was black and hot, steam curling like restless spirits. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, taking a sip. "Good coffee." She studied his face. "Are you truly him?" she whispered. "The Phantom." "Used to be," he answered. "Now I'm just tired." Outside, the town was already buzzing, faces pressed to windows, people gathered in knots on the boardwalk, word raced from mouth to mouth. The new sheriff killed 4 of Cutter's men. The new sheriff's the Phantom. Maybe, just maybe, this one lives till morning. Maybe. Because Cutter's outfit hadn't been just 6 men, there were 13 altogether, 9 more scattered around town taking what they wanted, and above them all rode their leader. Rudolph Kane. Kane the Reaper. 23 confirmed killings, bright mind, cold heart, calculating, vicious, the kind of man who hurt people just to prove he could. The doors of the saloon burst open and Mayor Eli Thompson stumbled in. He was short and round with the look of a man who'd been sweating his whole adult life. His thinning hair stuck to his scalp. "Sheriff Holloway, I heard shots, are you?" He stopped dead at the sight of the bodies, the color drained from his face. "Oh Lord. They started it," Vance said simply. Kane'll come after you for this, he'll bring everyone he's got, tonight most likely." "I know. What do we do?" the mayor asked, voice climbing toward panic. Vance glanced at him, then at Rose, then at the pale faces peering through the dirty windows, good people worn down by fear, too long under Kane's heel. "We get ready," he said. Dusk slid over Redemption Springs like blood poured across the sky. Vance walked the length of Main Street with his hands resting loosely at his sides, eyes everywhere. The place was small, one main road, maybe 20 buildings all told, general store, doctor's office, bank, livery, hotel, little white church at the far end with paint peeling off in tired strips. Mayor Thompson hovered beside him like an anxious shadow. "Kane got 9 men left plus himself," the mayor fretted. "That's 10 guns, Sheriff, 10. "Can you count to 10? Vance asked mildly. "I'm impressed." "This isn't a joke," Thompson snapped. "We're talking about you dying, us dying, the whole town." "Then quit talkin' and help," Vance said. He pointed at the general store. "Get every man who can shoulder a rifle up there, barricade the windows, leave firing gaps." "We're not fighters," Thompson protested. "You are now," Vance replied, "or you're dead." At the livery, an old, bow-legged man smelling of hay and horse sweat stepped up. "I'm End," he said, "stable's mine. End, I need every horse Kane's men might use made useless. Cut saddle straps, loosen cinches, spook 'em good, I want his boys on foot." "On it," End muttered, already moving. Rose appeared again, no longer in her saloon dress. She wore trousers now, her hair tied back, a Winchester resting against her shoulder like it belonged there. "I can shoot," she said. "My daddy hunted buffalo for 10 years. Vance studied her. In her eyes he saw something sharp and burning, rage, not panic, a useful kind of fury. "Hotel," he said, "second-floor windows cover the north side of town." She nodded once and trotted off. All up and down the street people began to move with purpose. Doors opened, lanterns were lit and dimmed, boards got nailed up, windows reinforced. A town that had been pretending to be dead stirred, stretched, and decided to fight back. Night dropped over the plains like a curtain. Vance settled into the sheriff's office, a squat little building with barred front windows that looked straight down Main. In the gun rack he'd found a Sharps .50 caliber rifle, heavy, solid, and honest. The kind of gun that didn't speak often, but when it did, the conversation ended. He sat in the dim light and cleaned it by habit, oiled the metal, ran cloth through the barrel, checked the sights, worked the action. It was meditation, the only kind he knew. Mayor Thompson hunched in a chair, white-knuckled around an old Colt Navy. "What if they don't come?" he asked. "What if they just ride off?" "They won't," Vance said. "Kane doesn't leave a challenge behind. Men like him think fear's something they have to refresh." "We could bargain," Thompson tried. "Pay them to go, we've got some money, maybe." "No," Vance said, the word was flat stone. "You don't strike deals with a sickness, you cut it out." The mayor swallowed. Why is this your fight, you just got here?" Vance looked at him for a long moment and saw a man who'd spent weeks watching his town strangled, ashamed and helpless. "Because I pinned this star on," Vance said, "that's enough." "That badge doesn't mean what it used to," Thompson said, "not out here." "It means everything," Vance replied, "or nothing means a damn thing." Outside, the dark thickened. No moon, just hard, cold stars scattered like nails in a black board. Somewhere in that night, 9 men and Kane were saddling up, checking guns, riding toward town with killing in mind. Vance blew out the lamp, let the darkness rush in. Shadow had always been his ally, the phantom didn't live in sunlight. He heard at first a distant rumble, hooves, several horses. The tremor rolled down the street. They came like a hammer. 10 riders poured into Redemption Springs at full gallop, guns already barking, windows shattered in bursts of glass and splinters, bullets punched into wood and brick. Muzzle flashes lit the street like lightning, outlining horse and rider in jerky snapshots. Vance watched from the window and counted 10, Kane at the head, taller than the rest, white duster glowing faintly in the chaos, a man who loved being seen. Rifles answered from the general store, the hotel, the bank's upper floor. Most shots went wide, hands shaking, eyes dazzled by dark and flare, but not all. One outlaw toppled sideways out of his saddle, disappearing beneath hooves. Another horse shrieked and collapsed, spilling its rider into the dirt. Vance settled the sharps into the window frame. The rifle's report was deeper than the others, a heavy crack that seemed to punch a hole in the night. His first shot tore a man off his horse, chest opening like someone had yanked him backward with a rope. Bang! Second shot, another outlaw's head snapped back. He fell like a sack of grain, dead before he hit the street. Kane's men swerved, shouting, the easy confidence of attacking a helpless town shattered. Take cover, Kane roared, find that bastard. They dove behind troughs, wagons, doorframes, anywhere that might stop a bullet. They tried to pinpoint the sharpshooter. Vance was already gone. He slipped out the back of the office, feet silent on packed dirt. He moved through the alleys like a shadow that knew every corner. Years of hunting men in bad places had taught him how to vanish, how to appear where no one expected. 2 of Kane's gunmen crouched behind the horse trough up the street, guns aimed at the sheriff's office windows, waiting for a silhouette that wasn't coming. Bang, bang. Both dropped before either understood the shape rising behind them. 5 dead now, 5 remaining plus Kane. The fight stopped being a charge and turned into something uglier, hide-and-seek played with bullets and fear. Kane's men spread out, creeping through darkness, hearts pounding, calling to each other in stage whispers. They weren't hunting a sheriff anymore, they were trying to find a legend. Vance stayed in the shadows, letting decades of instinct guide him. He knew how to become part of the dark, how to let other men's imagination do half his work. A young outlaw, maybe 20, edged along the side of the general store. His pistol shook in his hand. He'd signed up for swagger and easy money, not for this, rifles in the dark and some ghost of a lawman picking them off. He never saw Vance. He only felt cold steel settle against his temple. Run, Vance whispered, grab a horse and ride, don't turn around. The young man dropped his gun like it had burned him. Then he bolted for the livery, scrambled onto the nearest horse that still had a saddle, and pounded out of town. Not everyone deserved a grave. Some men just made stupid choices and needed a chance not to make them again. 4 left plus Kane. Another outlaw crept toward the sheriff's office, careful, watching every shadow. Older, seasoned, experienced enough to make himself a real threat. Not careful enough. Rose's Winchester barked from a hotel window. The man screamed and went to one knee, clutching his leg. End limped out of the stable with a shotgun braced against his shoulder. Sorry, son, he said. The blast ended the screaming. 3 plus Kane. HOLLOWAY. Kane's voice rolled down Main Street, rage and bravado mixed. I know it's you, the great phantom, come out where I can see you, let's settle this like men. Vance let the night answer, silence was better company than Kane. 2 more of Kane's men cracked. They threw themselves into saddles on half-spooked horses and tore away into the darkness, ignoring their leader's bellowed threats and promises. They'd rather live with Kane's anger than die in that street. In the end, things fell back to what they were always going to be, Kane and Vance. Kane stepped into the center of Main Street, white coat faint in the starlight, arms slightly spread, both revolvers holstered and ready. Just you and me now, Phantom, he shouted. Vance Holloway, the man who cleared out Black Mesa, let's see if the story's got your measure right. Vance walked out of the shadows with the slow confidence of a man who had done this too many times. The town watched from windows and cracked doors, eyes catching fragments of the scene, 2 silhouettes 20 paces apart. 2 lives, 2 legends, 2 different ideas of what killing was for. Kane had the advantage of youth, late 30s, quick, still hungry to prove something. He'd built his name not on fair fights but on cruelty, executions in the street, people shot in the back, whole families bullied into line or buried. "You're old," Kane observed, "slower than you used to be. This is my range now." "Range?" Vance's voice sounded weary. "These ain't acres and cattle, they're folks, children, men and women just trying to live." "Sheep," Kane said with a grin, "and I'm the shepherd." "You're a killer," Vance answered. "So am I. Difference is I only kill killers, you kill whoever's in your way." "Difference don't mean much when you're in the dirt," Kane replied. "One of us walks away, that's all that matters." The town held its breath, even the wind stilled. Kane narrowed his eyes. "No counting, just draw." They faced each other, hands loose at their sides, every muscle lined tight beneath their coats. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink till it was nothing but two men and two guns and the space between them. Kane moved first. He was fast, his hand blurred for the grip, his revolver clearing leather smooth as if the motion was stitched into his bones. The barrel began to rise, hammer cocking, finger tightening. Vance's gun was already firing. The shot hit Kane dead in the center of his chest. His white duster blossomed red. His own shot went wild, kicking up a puff of dust 3 feet to Vance's left. Kane looked down at the spreading stain, then up at Vance. Confusion twisted his features. "I was quicker," he gasped. "You drew faster," Vance said softly. "I fired faster, not the same thing." Kane dropped to his knees. "Who are you really?" he rasped. "Just a man who pulled the trigger too many times," Vance answered. "Killed too many people, tried to stop, couldn't." "You could have been like me," Kane coughed, blood on his lips. "Men like us, there's only one way it ends." He pitched forward into the dust. The reaper was reaped. Vance stood over him, feeling no victory, no joy, just a heavy emptiness and the familiar weight of one more face joining the others that waited for him every night behind his eyelids. 28 now, 28 men whose last moments he would never forget. The townsfolk trickled out slowly, then surged in a wave of relieved cheers and sobs. Mayor Thompson grabbed Vance's hand and pumped it. Rose wrapped her arms around him in a fierce hug. End clapped him on the back hard enough to rattle his ribs. They called him savior, hero, legend. Vance heard the words and felt only the old fatigue. He looked up and down the street at the bodies lying twisted in the dust. He counted them, Kane's men and Cutter's both, and memorized the positions, the faces, the way their hands had fallen. That was his curse, nothing faded. Every man he'd killed stayed sharp in his mind as if they might sit up and blink any second. "I need coffee," he told Rose quietly. Dawn came soft and gold, washing the town in clean light. Redemption Springs looked different in the morning, people back in the street, kids shouting and chasing each other, doors open, shopkeepers sweeping their thresholds. For a moment you could almost believe the night hadn't happened, that bodies weren't being hauled on wagons out toward the hill for burying. Vance sat on the bench outside the sheriff's office, coffee cup warm between his hands, watching it, all of it. The star still glinted on his chest. The egg, long scrubbed away, might as well have been from a different life. Mayor Thompson dropped down beside him with a weary sigh. "The council got together," he said. "We'd like you to stay, permanently. Sheriff's pay, a house, respect. You saved this town." "I killed for this town," Vance replied. "That's not the same thing." "Maybe not," the mayor allowed. "But around here that's how saving done. You're a hero whether you want the word or not." Vance studied the steam rising from his cup. "Heroes sleep at night," he said at last. "They don't see faces when they close their eyes. They don't wake up shaking at 3 in the morning. I'm no hero, Mayor. I'm just an old gunman trying to balance scales that don't balance." "Will you stay anyway?" Thompson asked. "We need you." He wasn't wrong. This town did need him, but so would the next one and the next after that. There would always be another Kane, another Cutter Briggs, some other man who thought fear and blood were currency. The work never ran out, neither did the ghosts. Maybe that was the point. Maybe this was the only sort of redemption a man like Vance Holloway could hope for, keep killing the worst of them until someone better or faster finally put him down. "I'll stay," he said quietly, "for now." Rose stepped out of the office with a fresh cup, trading his empty one for it. Her smile was small but real. not the frightened, brittle thing he'd seen last night, not worship, not awe, just simple, honest gratitude. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way. Maybe that was enough. Maybe on this side of the frontier that was all a man could reasonably ask. Vance took a slow drink and watched the sun climb higher over Redemption Springs, the little town that had lain down to die and somehow had decided to stand up again. Somewhere far off, in another dusty office with peeling paint and shuttered windows, another mayor would be bending over a telegram form. Another plea for help would rattle down a wire towards some drifting lawman. Another town would be waiting for a ghost.